Child abuse. I am aware that there is a bug zapper over my shoulder and that the mic is going to pick up that noise and it's going to be really annoying. But I kind of want it there. So, child abuse isn't something that just happens. It's something that has been that way for generations and generations and generations and generations. There's a really good chance that if your parents beat you, that they were beaten. There's a really good chance that they were beaten by their parents and they were beaten by their parents. I know I had talked to my mother once about my father's abuse, and she said, "Oh, honey, it's just he was raised in a time where women and children weren't people." She's correct. She's very correct. And that's how a lot of the older generation were raised, and that's how they raised their children. I was told that childhood is an illusion of grown-ups, whatever illusion that they want for them. So if you have the mindset like my mother did, which was that childhood is when you train a person how to be a grown-up, then you're going to have pretty strict parents. If it's the other way, that childhood should be enjoyed and playful and fun, then your parents may be a little lighter on you. The abuse that my siblings and I suffered from was a combination of physical violence, which is never fun, a lot of emotional torture based on religion and their expectations for the moment, and there generally wasn't any notice. So some of these things I found out in conversations as a grown-up. I visited my father in the hospital once, and he was pretty drugged up, and I asked him why he hit so much. And he said that he would be mad at Mom, so he would take it out on us. So when I think of some of those times I was over at a friend's house playing, or out in the backyard climbing a tree, or doing something else, and he came to get me and or my siblings for a good beating, those were times he was mad at my mother. So we didn't do anything. I mean, that's not what he told us. What we would get is, you know what you did. We weren't involved in the problem at all. That was his anger and his issues and his belief system that children weren't people. We were just property. I asked why he never hit my mom, and he said because he wouldn't stop. At least when he hit us and we were bleeding or unconscious, he would feel bad and he would stop. So to him, that was merciful. He's just a bad person. There's no excuse for that. And blaming him for the pain was something I did for a while, but I'm not going to give him the space in my head. It's not worth it. And he still hates me, because I'm the one who fought back the most, and I'm okay with that. We're probably never going to be friends. I'm okay with that too. It's just the way it is. But the bug zapper. So parents that hit don't always mean to be hitting. I have a brother who just got out of prison for his second conviction of beating on his children. He had tried and tried and tried to get into mental health. Part of that has to do with financing. When you're poor, you can't afford a therapist. The other part has to do with availability, finding one, getting one, and then the quality of the therapist makes a difference. The other issue is the amygdala hijacking. He was raised in some pretty bad trauma, and he was beaten and beaten. And actually, I've heard some stories of things that happened to him in my absence as well. And it's ingrained in his system. Yeah, it absolutely 100% can be overcome. But he didn't have any training. He didn't have anybody to talk to. And he was taught that this is what you do. When the children make noises, when they're loud, when they're misbehaving, when they're doing something, this is the reaction that you give. They do something you don't like, you hit them. So that's a systematic issue that he's going to have to work on. Sorry, I have an old computer, and the screen isn't, the camera doesn't always work very well. So it's not just a question of him, and again, he was trying to get help. He was trying to see a therapist. And especially after the first conviction, it took him a long time to be able to see his kids. He did not want to lose his temper, and he did not want to hurt his children, but he couldn't control himself either. So this is what happens when we get a little older and we turn into teenagers or young adults, and we're never going to be like that, and we're not going to do that, and we're going to be better people than our parents were. And then, we start making decisions and we start doing things. And then a lot of times we find ourselves back in those same patterns. There's some funny commercials about I became my parent. Some of that is like the bug zapper. So even though, although I'm giving them more credit, right? I'm thinking what they're thinking. They can see that this is damaging and it's killing others and hurting others. They're drawn to that. That is what they do. So there are things that can disrupt those behaviors, but until there's some kind of disrupting factor put in place, it is just natural that action and reaction. I don't know how old you are, and I don't know how old your parents are, but there's a really good chance that they were just a bug going to the bug zapper. That's just what they do. That's what they were taught. That's what they were taught before them. That's what they were taught before them. Children are not people. So part of accepting some of the hitting has to do with that. It's just realizing that they were taught that and they were taught that. And when you would go to other people, pastors are notorious for this. Not all of them all of the time, but that children need to be spanked. You go to church and they tell you that you need to spank your children and you need to keep them under control. You go to friends or whatever and you need to spank your children and you need to keep them under control. And you think, oh, well, I don't really like hitting my kids. And they're like, oh, no, spare the rod, spoil the child. You're supposed to spank your children. Oh, no, that child is mouthing off at you. You should spank them. There was a comedian, it was kind of funny, and the kid had mouthed off, and he's like, oh, you need to beat him, because that's what the bugs do. They were taught to beat. They were taught to beat. And so even in the process of growing older, when you go get advice, or how are you going to handle this 2-year-old, or how are you going to, the advice you're given is, oh, you need to spank them. Oh, you need to beat that child. You can't put up with that. That child needs to be physically manhandled and to learn control and obedience. It's like the bug zapper. Does that help you recover? Does that help you feel better? That's one of those things you kind of have to accept as that was and this is. Yeah, it hurt. It really did. But your parents were just bugs going to the bug. It feels personal, though. It does. I'm not going to lie to you about that. But it's late, and there are bugs everywhere, and cold. So I'm going to clip this up. But as far as the physical part of child abuse, just remember that they were taught it, they were trained it, the generation before them, the generation before them. And if they did look for advice, that was the advice that they were given, was to start hitting.